The revolution is lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Today's study is highly important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. Today, the chairman continues reading from the 2017 political report to the African People's Socialist Party plenary titled Putting Revolution Back on the Agenda. He starts at the section focusing on the African Socialist International on page 31. In the first hour, we will have we'll be reading the study materials with the chairman, and in the second hour, we'll open it up to you, our live viewers, for your questions. It's my honor now. Before I do that, I just want to also recognize that we are 10 minutes late, and I just want to be really self-critical for our usual attendees of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. We were having some technical difficulties on my end, so just want to thank you for bearing with us and tuning in with us regardless, and we're just, again, extremely excited for the chairman's study. So now I would like to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Sister Akile. I think it's significant that we talk about the political report to this plenary in 2017 that was titled Putting Revolution Back on the Agenda. And the fact that we had such a title was an indication of the status of our struggle, our movement at the time. I was just looking a moment ago at the political report, the main resolution for the first Congress of our party that was held 40 years ago this year in Oakland, California, after we had been in existence for 9 years. And at that Congress, we had solidarity statements and participation from throughout the world, from the Vietnamese Revolution, from comrades who were struggling in Chile and Colombia. And at the time, the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania was there, and from the Sandinistas from Nicaragua had representation there. And I'm mentioning this because, and there were others who I did not mention, but I'm mentioning this because that was a time where the objectives of struggle were clear, where that they were still fresh in the minds, the memories of the people, the struggles that were defined as revolutionary struggles. The understanding was that for most of us that we were had to get capitalism out of our lives. It had to be overturned. We were clear that we were making a struggle to seize power and to initiate socialist development for the masses of our people. That has diminished considerably for the last period of time. And even during an era where we've seen within a 3-month period, more than 10,000 mobilizations and sometimes actual uprisings in the United States shortly following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, the revolution was not something that was discussed, was put on the agenda. And it was not commonly understood that the objective was to make revolution. And this is a struggle that the party has been involved in for the longest period of time, to to put the revolution back on the agenda so that we're not just involved in struggle. When I say we, I mean people who claim to be about dealing with the contradictions of murder and violence and assault on the environment and everything else that we are affected by during this era. It's all spontaneous. And what I mean by spontaneity, I mean, even though it may have been planned, it's spontaneous in the sense that it has not been connected to the objective of actual taking power and propelling ourselves to a position of actual leadership and governance. And this has been for the longest period of time a real difficulty where revolutionary movements have been crushed, revolutionary leaders murdered or throughout the world, and then we were put back into this situation where the oppressors had become extraordinarily comfortable, that they had reconquered the ability and even the right to keep the masses of our people and peoples around the world living in abject poverty and under the worst kinds of superstitions and oppression, a morass of just a sense of the inevitability of having to live like this. Our party, of course, we see changes happening now, and the rulers of the world in a very shaky position now. They have contenders, real contenders for that role. And of course, there's an obvious kind of decay that's present within the dominant leading sector of the rulers. That white power is on a very shaky foundation because it is a foundation resting on the exploitation of colonized and oppressed peoples around the world. But today, that there is obviously a lack of confidence that's being experienced by the rulers. And we've talked about that over the last few days, in fact, on other forums that we've had access to. But and so there's today we think that in the African People's Socialist Party we played a major role in influencing the spontaneous movement of people and contributing to the depth of the crisis and the breadth of the crisis that this social system is experiencing by really helping to inform the conscious actors in change today. So I'm going to go to that sector of the political report, to the plenary in 2017. And the plenary itself is just a further evidence of how a revolutionary process through the African People's Socialist Party has achieved greater stability and greater confidence and a capacity, lending for the first time in a very long time through our party, a real revolutionary trajectory and lending stability to the revolutionary project, clarity to the revolutionary project, of providing a to what end, which is what we've been about for a long period of time. So we're now on page 30, I think it is, in the political report. We've been reading from it for a couple of weeks. And this year, and I'm going to begin reading now. This year, our party focuses on African Socialist International. That was in 2017 that we were talking about. This was the plenary. So to that, the political report to that plenary. So the political report to our second plenary of the 6th Congress spoke briefly but eloquently of what was necessary of our African Socialist International or ASI work at this time. And so we talk about the political report to the second plenary of the 6th Congress. This is what we had to say, and quote, throughout the Americas, our people also suffer an identity crisis that stems from a false national consciousness that has no material foundation. We exist in a form of identity purgatory, neither one thing nor the other, all hyphenated identities that never sufficiently explain our poverty and desperate conditions of existence. We're Africans, period. The ASI must wage a major campaign within the African world, a cultural revolution of sorts. We must wage this campaign in a manner that reveals the heroism and critical role of African workers and peasants, the toiling masses. And I've seen someone suggested, raise the question that perhaps on today, we should say something about what the general efforts of the African Socialist International should be at this time. And I think this still holds. This is what we have to do. We say that the ASI must wage a major campaign within the African world, a cultural revolution of sorts. We must wage this campaign in a manner that reveals the heroism and critical role of African workers and peasants, the toiling masses. And part of what we're talking about here is we say we are Africans, period. The whole African world has to come to understand this. And while it may sound strange to some, those of us in the party located in various places in the world know that there's nothing strange about this, because the question of who we are as a people is something that has frustrated our struggles for some time now. And by which I mean that we have so many different identities, and the question of the main primary identity, the most fundamental identity that we have to achieve to move our revolutionary project forward is that as a nation. And as a nation, we don't mean as Ghanaians or as Haitians or as Bahamians, as some people, like I put it, or African Americans or New Africans, et cetera, the whole African nation. And this is the cultural revolution. We are Africans, period. The ASI, the African Socialist International, must wage a major campaign within the African world, a cultural revolution of sorts. We must wage this campaign in a manner that reveals the heroism and critical role of African workers and peasants, the toiling masses. And so we're talking about, we're not talking about cultural nationalism, as you can see here, but we say our cultural revolution must extol the producers, the workers, the creators of all value, and the need for a new society that reinstates the authority of the workers, and especially African women, from the producing class, who are central to all production and society itself. So this is a statement that we are reading. We have in this document that's from the political report to the second plenary to the sixth Congress. Something about how we had to understand what our task, our responsibilities are. And that addresses the question still today. This is fundamental to the ASI work. First of all, this recognition of our African identity. And this is something that more and more Africans are able to jump on from throughout the world, but we took it a bit further. And we said that we have to raise this cultural revolution. And this, by the way, is an assault on the hyphenated identities that don't explain anything about who we are, and that this cultural revolution, it has to be waged in a manner that reveals the heroism and the critical role of African workers and peasants, the toiling masses. And we say African workers and peasants, we're not talking about how well somebody does work in the fields, et cetera. We're saying that we recognize that the workers and the poor peasants are critical to the fundamental to the underpinning of the whole social system, and that they are fundamental to our existence as a people. They produce value. They produce what is necessary for us to live. Although they, and I think for that reason, the kinds of society that's come into existence of our oppression and exploitation really slanders and undermines their role and so we're saying that the Cultural Revolution must extol the producers, the workers, the creators of all value, and the need for a new society that reinstates the authority of the workers, and especially African women from the producing class, who are central to all production and to society itself. Our ASI work has suffered ups and downs. It has not had the benefit of adequate leadership and support from me as its leader or from the party headquartered in the US. This is because of the escalation of the struggle within the US front of the African liberation movement and the advantages it has provided for the party as a whole, depending on our ability to move rapidly to build our political, economic, and organizational capacity. So we have had this ability based on where we are in the party, the ASI, the African Socialist International, which is the party writ large. Within the United States, we have been provided, there's been an escalation of a certain kind of struggle that provided our party an opportunity to grow, to build quickly in the place where we are headquartered, and that can contribute to the development of the party as a whole. And if we could move rapidly to build our political, economic, and organizational capacity. So if we were able to do that here, then it had serious implications for how the work of the party throughout the world would be able to develop. And so that contributed to our concentration on our attention being so concentrated on a situation inside the United States and our capacity in the United States. So although we are still confronted with the age-old task of creating adequately developed leading cadre, we are in a much better place to build the ASI work than in the past. Historically, the most influential Communist International was built in 1919 through the leadership of the Bolsheviks that had recently come to power in Russia. That international had the practical and political benefit of Bolshevik state power in Russia. And this is really important because what happened in Russia, the Russian Revolution, put the Bolsheviks in power, and the Bolsheviks in power were able to contribute to the development, the whole what came to be known as the Communist International at that time. And there was, so we say, a big contradiction we have always faced in building the African Socialist International is the fact that there is no revolutionary African state that can lend its weight to this project. In the past, we made efforts to win the governments of Grenada, Libya, and Burkina Faso to participate in this project. A split within the New Jewel movement of Grenada, the ruling party of Grenada facilitated a US invasion that overthrew the government, imprisoned its surviving leaders, and eliminated Grenada as a venue and the possibility of the New Jewel movement as the African Socialist International, as African Socialist International partners or members. I should mention to you, however, that we did send someone to Grenada that actually engaged in meetings. We took documents to them with the objective of winning them to participate in the African Socialist International, that's to say the New Jewel movement, and with the objective of perhaps even holding the first ASI Congress there in Grenada. But as there was the split, the US government invaded the country, captured, imprisoned its leaders, and reimposed its former reactionary forces in power. Our meeting with Thomas Sankara, leader of the government of Burkina Faso, was non-eventful, mostly because of the lack of unity by the party envoys sent there, who did not effectively carry out the mission of recruiting Sankara to the ASI project. So that was on us. And our attempts to win participation from Libya were frustrated by the Libyan diplomatic representatives of the Libyan embassy in London, who we approached and who demonstrated very little interest in building an international African revolutionary organization. So this has meant that the work to build the ASI has fallen squarely on party resources within the US, notwithstanding the splendid work done by party members in other parts of the world. However, we do not have the political and material resources provided by Soviet and Russian state support to members of the Communist International. An example of that support was the $1 billion plus annual contribution made to the Communist Party of the United States up until December 26, 1991 collapse of the Soviet Union. And I just want to say that this is the existence of what was being characterized as the Communist International and its activity in Africa and other places around the world. That contributed to how important we came to understand it was to create an African Socialist International. Because the Communist International that was headquartered in what was then the Soviet Union, some people refer to the Soviet Russia, had come to be an entity that really facilitated the agenda of the Soviet Union, Soviet Russia. And for a while, what a fundamental task of the Soviet Union was to defend itself from the ongoing incursions by various states, imperialist states, and to try to, and much of what it revolved around was that, much of its activities and much of what the members of what was called the Communist International spread throughout the world found themselves doing so much work to either defend the Soviet Union or Soviet Russia, as it was also called, or to be able to project its interests in various places around the world to facilitate its overall agenda. So we said we didn't have those kinds of resources. And in many places in the African world, life itself is problematic. This means that the US and European fronts of the African Revolution in particular will carry a heavier load in pulling the ASI together. We will play a critical role in the success of the African Socialist International, and this is particularly true of the US front. And this is not something that we are whining about or crying about, because in fact, as I mentioned, the role that the Communist International under the leadership of the Soviet Union was playing is part of what informed us of the absolute need to create a socialist and African Socialist International, where we would be able to pool our talents, our resources, and our revolutionary will to pool and direct these in a way that would advance the revolution and the liberation of African people. Because at this time, the Communist International had declared that there were only something like 5, I think it was, revolutionary parties in all of Africa. And they were called the Authentic 5 or the Authentic 6. I think it might have been 6. And so we felt like it was, and because that most of these Authentic 6 saw their roles as carrying out the strategic objectives of Soviet Russia, it really had a serious impact on how they viewed the world and how they moved around the world, and whether or not they were primarily involved in trying to liberate Africa and African people, and they weren't. The Soviet Union was able to define what the political line was coming out of Africa, and not in a way that was something that informed the overall revolutionary project of the world, but that met the interests of Soviet Russia. And what we are saying is that we should, that is to say, we being African people having its own revolutionary party would be the force that would determine what our objectives are and how we would move. And the way that the Garvey movement was able to do that in the early part of the 20th century. And Garvey, the basic role, the basic understanding, the basic strategic understanding of that movement was Africa for Africans at home and abroad. And that was a slogan that recognized that Africa itself under colonial domination. Africa under colonial domination at home, that is to say, on the continent and abroad. That is in the United States and various other places where we live. We were living under foreign domination. And so that slogan informed what the African Revolution should be about. These were African fundamentalists, as the Garveyites were called. And we consider ourselves 21st century Garveyites. We are African internationalists. And so in the US, I'm going back to the document. In the US, we're not only advantageously located because of the high degree of technological development that's in the United States, but also because of the numbers, density, and organized history of resistance of the domestically colonized African population. Moreover, the experience and work of the Uhuru movement and African People's Socialist Party that go back more than 50 years provided an advantage that cannot be overstated. And when we say that this goes back for more than 50 years, we're talking about 50 years of consistent struggle, which should mean, and did mean in our instance, 50 years of development, revolutionary development, that and in every place around the world, we saw this development of the revolutionary project of African people disrupted, assassinated out of existence, jailed out of existence. And such an assault was also made on the African Revolution, on the US front of the African Revolution. So we say within the US, we've had the benefit of the many years of work and experience that we have acquired, the development of economic institutions and a differently developed psychology among Africans that has long been open to the idea of Black power and self-determination as compared to our brothers and sisters in Europe. And of course, the difference in Europe is not genetic or anything like that. We are one African people, but in Europe, the development of our work was influenced in part, certainly in most recent history, by the fact that we have been able, because there were comparatively fewer of us, that the potential or the thought of actually seizing power in Europe was actually foreign and very difficult to assume as a possibility. And so Africans, mostly in Europe, mostly Africans who have been separated from the mother country, stuck in Europe, and in many instances, like in the United States, found ourselves in Europe fighting to try to be accepted by Europe, not being able to make the connection of how the struggle of African people in Europe will actually facilitate the overall liberation of African people everywhere. How do we fight for Africa in Germany? How do we fight from Africa while we're living in England? How do we fight for Africa from Portugal, etc.? The African Socialist International will resolve that, but early on, this was part of what influenced how we understood the world. So we said that as a community, Africans in the US have been less intoxicated by the notion of the American dream than Africans elsewhere. And this is true because we found that our experiences showed us that there was this distorted assumption about the United States because the United States did not function as directly as a colonizer on the continent of Africa. So many Africans living on the continent of Africa had a distorted view of what the United States was. I remember Malcolm X when he spoke before the Organization of African Unity, made the point that that Africans on the continent should not make the mistake of seeing U.S. dollarism as something that could come as a substitute for European colonialism. Obviously, we've seen subsequent to that time that that's precisely what did happen. And so in his retort to the I Have a Dream speech of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X showed that Africans here, that is to say within the United States, have been living a nightmare. So our work to build the African Socialist International has always been predicated on the assumption that while Africans are individually impoverished, collectively we can utilize our skills and limited resources to build our international party of competent, revolutionary cadre necessary for the liberation and unification of Africa and Africans worldwide. Comrade Kenge, I would like for you to give a ring to the comrade in New York who's trying to reach me, and let him know where we are so that he might come on to this discussion if he wanted to do that. So the only meaningful precedent we have to learn from is that provided by the Universal Negro Improvement Associations and African Communities League, the UNIA, of the early 20th century. And we will study the work of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, but we will also continue to learn from our own experiences and experiments. Some are bewildered by the fact that Garvey was able to build such a mammoth organization of millions of African people on virtually every continent on Earth in the early 1900s, before modern methods of communication like the internet were available. And I'm going to say some things about that. But while it is true that Garvey was an extraordinary organizer, there were other factors that played a role in his efforts that we must be aware of when moving forward with our own work to unite the international struggle to free Africa and Africans through the ASI today. And the main thing is that during the Garvey era of the early 1920s, almost all of our people everywhere in the world were denied self-interested, productive participation within the capitalist economy, which was essentially a colonial economy. Our people were dominated by the most vulgar kind of political oppression and life-draining economic exploitation everywhere. And so organizations like the NAACP and the Black pseudo-socialists and communists all contentedly relied on a subservient, dependent relationship with white people or some form of white power. The dominant political philosophy promoted continued, if modified, servitude as a solution to our oppressive exploitation in the United States, Africa, the Caribbean, and everywhere. That's true today. And W.E.B. Du Bois and the NAACP promoted assimilation with whites as the way forward. Booker T. Washington, founder of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, promoted another form of capitulation that relied on Africans making ourselves necessary to white people and capable of caring for ourselves within our own colonized reality. Impressed by Washington because of his emphasis on Africans doing for Africans, Garvey took this component of Washington's philosophy and revolutionized it with the demand that Africans capture state Black power to serve our interests, Africa for Africans. Garvey's attraction was that he called on Africans to assert ourselves in becoming masters of our own fate and creating our own economy with steamship lines and recording companies and factories and so on. Based on the existing circumstances of our colonial status, Garvey opened the only door for Africans to come together collectively to feed, clothe, and house ourselves, even some patriotic elements of the African petty bourgeoisie, especially those who were denied full entry into the colonial capitalist economy, were attracted to the Garvey movement as a way to realize their aims for economic advancement and national dignity that could not be attained within the white world. So this is part of what helped the Garvey movement and the UNIA to become so influential, because there was no other door open for African people to participate in anything. So if we wanted to have a recording, artists being recorded, a recording capacity, studios, radio, things like that, then we had to create our own, and Garvey's movement did it. And if we wanted to have any kind of industry, we had to do it on our own, and Garvey movement collectivized our capacity and did it. If we wanted to have anything that looked like a steamship line, which was extraordinary, you're talking about 1920, Garvey collectivized, mobilized our ability to do it and did it. And so as opposed to what we saw that the NAACP and other organizations who thought that in order to be successful, that you had to cajole the white man, the white government, the colonizer, to allow you to enter into their process that in of itself was a process of extracting value, of exploiting and oppressing people. Garvey said, let's do it ourselves. That's what independence is. That's what self-government is. That's what Garvey fought for. So because the Garvey movement offered African people in real practical ways that people could observe and experience a solution for our condition, that the people could participate in creating the movement that Garvey created. The Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Community Leagues exploded around the world. So so we say that based on the existing circumstances of our colonial status, Garvey opened the only door for Africans to come together collectively to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. Even some patriotic elements of the African petty bourgeoisie, especially those who were denied full entry into the colonial capitalist economy, were attracted to the Garvey movement as a way to realize their aims for economic advancement and national dignity that could not be attained within the white world. You couldn't do anything with dignity in the white world, even if they rub your head for good luck and make you buck dance and do all other kind of silly stuff that Africans have become quite proficient in, the sectors of the neo-colonial. Even when they talk about being free and independent and what have you, that's what they've been about. And it's only the Garvey movement opened the door for people, to Africans, to live with some kind of dignity and to fight for capacity like other human beings. And the Garvey movement allowed Africans to be able to perceive a capacity to be self-governing, to rule, to be in charge of our own affairs. And I'm really understating the impact and influence of this powerful movement by Marcus Garvey, how it influenced virtually everything about that Africans were able to conceive of, not just in the United States, but in Africa and various places around the world. So since that time, with the advent of neo-colonialism, since the time of Garvey, and Black entry into white-owned and controlled corporations and business enterprises, the nominal ability for Africans to advance using the white colonial institutions had a severe impact on the consciousness of Africans. The US government also instituted laws and policies to make it nearly impossible for independent African economic growth. Africans developing insurance companies from collective burial societies and Black-owned stock offerings such as that which propelled the Black Star shipping lines became almost impossible. This was another method of forced dependency within the overall colonial control of African people. And recently, the primary economic activity within the African community has been the illegal drug economy, placed there as a counterinsurgent revenue generation resource for a troubled legal capitalist economy. Today, we are confronted with many of the same circumstances that gave energy to Garvey and the UNIA. I want to say that again. Today, we are confronted with many of the same circumstances that gave energy to Garvey and the UNIA. And I'm saying this because it should influence comrades, brothers and sisters in the party, the Uhuru movement. We should recognize this and take advantage of this. It should inform us about the urgency and the possibilities of the moment. The parasitic capitalist economy is losing steam all over the world. This is in 2017, 4 years ago when we were talking about this. The European economies are threatened with collapse, and there's also great economic uncertainty within the US. The promise of economic advancement for the African petty bourgeoisie and the aspirants within the US has been brutally withdrawn. Neo-colonialism in Africa and around the world has fallen into great disfavor among African people. The white parasitic so-called donor nations continue to reveal its fangs daily, denying African access to our own resources in Africa. and blocking every attempt we make to enter Europe and the United States, where much of our stolen wealth is located. The political report to our 6th Congress provides our party with a strategic direction for building the African Socialist International. It also calls on us to resolve some of the organizational problems that have hampered our work in the past. We must deepen our resolve to carry out this work with the urgency demanded of the times. We must also remember that it is our work with the ASI that lends practical materialist legitimacy to our philosophy of African internationalism. So we must build an army of cadre. Our work to consolidate every component of the party, to build our committees will ultimately be determined by the quality of our cadre. Recruitment is important, and we can no longer pretend that numbers do not matter, they do. However, the importance of the number of party members is not as significant as the quality of our cadre. We do not only need to celebrate our growth in numbers and do all that is necessary to facilitate the influx of new party members. What is even more important to our party is the quality of our cadre, the depth of their unity with the party and their willingness to carry out the mission of the revolution as defined by the party. This question of cadre is not new. We spoke of cadre in the political report to the party's 5th Congress in 2010. This excerpt reveals what we mean by cadre and what qualities they must possess to make our party competent to putting revolution back on the agenda, overthrow imperialist white power, and propel our people to our proper place in history under the revolutionary leadership of the African working class. And this is what we wrote in terms of the political report to our July 2010 Congress. Quote, no matter how great or genuine the problems or significance of individuals, they cannot be allowed to undermine the responsibility to place the interests of the revolution and the party first, above all else. This means that within the party, all our members must aspire to becoming cadre. Of cadre, we wrote then, I'm quoting again, no matter how great or genuine the problems or significance of individuals, they cannot be allowed to undermine the responsibility to place the interests of the revolution and the party first, above all else. This means that within the party, all our members must aspire to becoming cadre. Cadre must be taught to understand that the party is everything, without which our party will be left with another 500 years of misery should we survive the desperate aggressions of this imperialism and crisis at all. If there is to be independence, unification, and socialism in our lifetime, it will be because our party, deeply united in our mission, is successful. This cannot happen with an organization of whining, self-serving, individualistic members incapable of seeing beyond their own real or perceived pain or genius, unquote. This is the kind of membership required to seize and wield political power in the contest with the most vicious imperialist enemy the world has ever encountered. This is a membership and leadership that have become professional revolutionaries, that have adopted struggle and party membership as a way of life, not something that is pursued when it is convenient. Listen, comrades, we say here for some comrades, this is difficult. Our sense of morality is distorted by our relationship with colonial capitalism, where we are taught that individual freedoms and individual responsibilities for our families and loved ones is the pursuit of the highest order. At the same time, colonial capitalism crushes down our whole people, reducing us to little more than hapless, pathetic, inconsequential beings who are murdered daily en masse as a normal function of colonial capitalism. Socialist morality, real morality, requires us to understand that we cannot sacrifice the future of our oppressed and despised people for our own individual interests, no matter how important these interests are to us as individuals. Our cadre must rise above the bourgeois pursuit of personal happiness acquired independently of the happiness of our nation and our class. And this is what we are saying is that members to become cadre is not just to be somebody who can spout the lines and use slogans coming from the party, but it is to make the fundamental commitment to and take responsibility. Each member of the party must be taught to become cadre, which is each member must take personal responsibility for the emancipation, liberation, the unification of the African nation and the Africa itself. Everybody should be armed with that understanding, armed with that mission. So this is what much of the party's internal political struggles revolve around. The willingness of party members and especially party leaders to commit fully to the pursuit of the revolutionary emancipation of our people, to fight with all our will to liberate our people and build a new world of free people who benefit from the fruits of our labor and our genius. You know, sometimes people use the fact that we fight for cadre and create an organization of cadre. They use this to slander us because they know where the people are, generally speaking, that so committed to these small spaces that colonialism allow us to have to some extent or another. So our worldview is limited to our village, to our ethnic group, to the village or town or township that we live in, or something to that effect, and we can't see the entire world. African internationalism and the party brings the world to African people in the smallest village, in the shanty towns, and every place that African people live in. This is the thing that expands our vision so that we can see the world beyond what's happening in our family, to our family, with our family, with the ethnic group that we may be living in. This is what African internationalism does. This is what we talk about in terms of having party cadre who are committed, every individual have committed to the total liberation of Africa, the unification of Africa, African people, the African nation as it exists throughout the world. So Le Duan was one of the leaders of the Vietnam Revolution. He wrote prodigiously on the issue of and character of cadre. In a political document titled Some Problems of Cadre and Organization in Socialist Revolution, he had this to say. And we're quoting Le Duan here. After the party has worked out a correct political line, organizational work in general and cadre work in particular are decisive factors for success in the revolutionary task. After the party has worked out a correct political line, organizational work in general and cadre work in particular are decisive factors for success in the revolutionary task. After the party has worked out a correct political line, organizational work in general and cadre work in particular are decisive factors for success in the revolutionary task, unquote. Le Duan gave these defining characteristics of cadre. And we're quoting Le Duan again. Said complete loyalty to the ideals of socialism and communism, to the interests of the working class and the nation, to the political line of the party, the severest sense of organization and discipline, close contacts with the masses, close contacts with the masses, close contacts with the masses, and the ability to fulfill the task assigned. These are the fundamental unvarying requirements in the qualifications of cadre in whatever period, unquote. These are the standards to which our party members and leaders must strive, and the standards by which we judge party members and by which we must also be judged. Members of our party do not simply have intra-party relations. We do not simply have the responsibility of acting a certain way with party members within the relative security of our inner-party life. We also have the responsibility for leading the masses of our people, of participating in the mass organizations and associations within our oppressed communities, as well as creating organizations of the people that require our leadership. We are not casual bystanders and cheerleaders on the sidelines of history who only record political events as they occur. We are architects of the unfolding milieu, helping to define and guide it every step of the way according to the African internationalist analysis. We must lead. So it is 8:58. I'm going to just read a couple more pages and turn it over to you, Comrade Director. So we said our party has the benefit of 45 years of revolutionary leadership. We have established our 5-year plan with the political report to the 6th Congress. The document debated and voted on by party members to guide our work until the next Congress in 2018. The political report to our 5th Congress played an indispensable role in shaping that plan. And again, this, what I'm quoting now should really contribute to an understanding of the party as, not just some spontaneous entity that we move based on what's happening at the moment, or we get whiplashed from going this way and that way without any to what end that we're involved in. So from 2010 through our 6th Congress in 2013 up to the present time, this is we are talking about now, this comes from our political report to the plenary in 2017. We have been working with this plan, modifying and reinforcing our understanding of the plan as it continues to be tested by events and by our practice. Our party has the benefit of a 45-year-old history, this is in 2017, of genuine revolutionary struggle through which we have acquired experience and an unmatched level of political maturity. We have developed party structures necessary to carry out our mission. We have developed a number of institutions that represent our understanding of our revolutionary task, including preparing to take political power in our own hands and to govern. I can't overstate that. We have developed party structures necessary to carry out our mission. We have developed a number of institutions that represent our understanding of our revolutionary task, including preparing to take political power in our own hands and to govern. I'm saying this over because there are some people who have this romantic notion of what the revolution is supposed to be about, and they can only see, glamorous pictures of wading through swamps, AK-47 strapped to our backs or in our hands, ready to discharge at the sight of the enemy, etc. But the fact is that when we talk about those are incidents in the struggle to achieve the political power. The objective is to get the power and to prepare right now to take the power and to wield the power. We said preparing to take political power in our own hands and to govern, which is to wield the political power. So the process that the party has created, that I have created for this movement, for the revolution, is that we are constantly involved in the process of taking that power and the process of learning how to wield that power. This is what the African People's Socialist Party, this is what this political report to the plenary represent. We have developed political clarity by waging ideological campaigns within our own party and in the world, testing our worldview while making the most serious assault on our colonialist, capitalist oppressors. We have fought to bring science to the struggle for our liberation, rejecting superstition in all its forms. It is the African People's Socialist Party that has fought the ongoing battle against the philosophical idealistic nonsense, that ours is a struggle against racism, the ideas in the heads of our oppressors. We have declared it is not the ideas in the heads of anyone that oppresses us, rather it's the material reality upon which these ideas are based, from which they stem. Our conditions of existence constitute colonial domination by a foreign and alien state power that has appropriated for itself the power of life and death over our people worldwide. This colonial state power functions as a servant to a parasitic social system that has devoured Africa and Africans worldwide, along with our dreams for happiness and collective well-being. It is not only that the fight against racism is something that keeps our white colonial oppressors in the center of the white created and defined world. It is also that it is an insoluble struggle that cannot provide a concrete solution or a concrete victory. It is the African People's Socialist Party that pointed out that a struggle against racism actually perpetuates the very same thing it claims to oppose. The idea of white supremacy is reinforced by the fact that it is presumed the victims are consumed by the idea of the supremacy of whites as reflected in the struggle against it or against racism. This is critical, especially in an era where imperialism is reeling with crisis, responding to the success or threat of success by anti-colonial struggles globally. These struggles are resulting in cataclysmic threats to the parasitic capitalist world economy. It is this nonsense about race-generated contradictions that contributes to the subjective, personalized politic that lock people into highly subjective, personalized responses to political struggle based on a conditioned race that neither the colonizer nor the colonized can do anything to change. In other words, when we identify colonialism, the foreign and alien domination of a people for political advantage and economic exploitation, it removes the subjective factor of race as the dominant issue and allows anyone who wants to do so to participate in uniting with the oppressed. It does not require anyone to quote unquote like or to have a personal affinity for anyone else. In the same vein, the African People's Socialist Party has demystified white people. The science of African internationalism has given us all the necessary information concerning the violent behavior of Europeans against the rest of the world. It is behavior that is generated by a superstructure resting on an economic base of slavery and colonialism. Capitalism is the parasitic political economy that thrusts white people, Europe, and Europeans into history. Capitalism is the parasitic political economy that thrusts white people, Europe, and Europeans into history. Capitalism, spawned by slavery and colonialism, yanked bedraggled warring tribes and people located northwest of Greece into a coherent group tied together by a common economy and a sense of sameness that owed its unity and success to world slavery. The African People's Socialist Party, our party, identified that the struggle against colonialism represents the critical front in the war against capitalism, the enemy of all humanity. So, Comrade Director, I don't know how you feel about where we are now in terms of whether we should proceed or whether we should stop and have discussion.
Uhuru, Chairman, I think based on the amount of discussion that's coming in right now, there are many questions for you. So I think that we should open it up now.
Okay. We return to page 39 next week, I imagine.
All right, I'll just make that note. Uhuru. Yes, thank you, Chairman. And as just stated, I mean, you have the comment section on Facebook and YouTube, and even in the Zoom room right now, like on fire. There are several questions that I want to be able to get to, but of course, really want to appreciate you for this study. And we have also one question from last week that really ties into, the discussion today that we'll look at as well. Currently still tracking where people are watching from, but we have Oakland, California, Boston, Massachusetts, Lakeland, Florida, Battle Creek, Michigan, St. Petersburg, Florida, Singapore, Pinellas Park, Florida, San Diego, California, Chicago, Illinois, Durham, North Carolina, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Occupy Tanzania or South Africa, Swaziland, St. Louis, Missouri, and Huntsville, Alabama are on the line. So the last question that came in last week that we were not able to get to came from a Felicia Lloyd, and they asked and commented, Uhuru, yes, we were stripped of our identity. How do we get that back and identify as a people that connects us to the motherland? So,
yeah, I think that is what we are talking about, and I'm glad Comrade Sister Felicia Lloyd raised that issue, because the fact is how we do it is by doing it. And I'm not being facetious, or I'm not, understating the significance of that question. I'm saying that history is made by the people. And the people, with the leadership of the Advanced Detachment of the African People's Socialist Party, organizing ourselves collectively all around the world. And the world will be as the people determine it should be. And as we grow our consciousness and our organization, if we develop the right political line, we put in motion that process. And so that's what we're doing now when we are building the party throughout the world now. And our presence, first of all, physically, concretely as the party members who are in the townships in South Africa and other places, who are in Tanzania, who are in the Caribbean, who are in, throughout the various world, this physical presence. Then the work that we talked about earlier on, when we were quoting from, I think, 2010 political report, the task of the ASI in terms of initiating this cultural revolution. Human beings doing that. Human beings having events. Human beings spreading the philosophy of African internationalism globally around the world. That's our responsibility as human beings who convinced us that we are not one people. As human beings who work all the time to keep us separated, but the human beings who do that are increasingly fractured themselves, and they are fractured, their unity, their self-perception is under siege by the success of peoples around the world taking back our resources. So we are engaged at this very moment, Sister Felicia, in doing exactly what you're talking about. I think you should, if you're not already, you should be looking at how you can connect with, join our party, the Uhuru movement, etc., so that you can become a conscious, organized agent to carry out the mission that you just defined as being so necessary, and as we are defining absolutely necessary as well. In fact, as I mentioned, I think from 2010, the African Socialist International, the African People's Socialist Party globally, must see as a responsibility, part of it, a critical aspect of our work, is to initiate this cultural revolution that helps Africans to understand who it is that we are, and to grow an understanding of the significance of African working people. And the reason that's so important is because the African petty bourgeoisie, who can talk this all African, Pan-Africanist kind of stuff on the one hand, they have goals which, if it were possible for them to be accomplished, they could be accomplished under the existing colonial capitalist system. We're saying colonial capitalism has to go, and therefore the unification of African people that we talk about must happen under the revolutionary leadership of the African working class, who want to overturn the whole rotten social system so that Africa can live and breathe and can carry, and like all human beings, have the ability to carry out our mission in the process of creating and recreating life itself. So I hope that was helpful, Comrade Sister Felicia. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Felicia, to that question. And I'm going to go ahead and just move it right to the next ones. So we had several questions come in from Comrade Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Luwezi Kinshasa. And he posed several questions. So I'm going to just go down, just deal with the one, and then we'll look at other people's questions and then come back to this. So he asked, what's the first difference between ASI and the international call from Marxists from Marx to Lenin? Well, I don't think I understood that. Hold on.
Well, I think a difference would be this. There was a fundamental assumption that was made by Marx and Lenin of a world and how human society developed. The work that Marx did in particular contributed to advancing the science of society, that there is a science of society itself. But the problem is that Marx's development of science did something independent of Africans and other people's involvement or even acknowledgement as being forces in society carrying out a mission for ourselves. And therefore, they've come up with different kinds of formulas for advancing the interests of human society, which really ultimately meant advancing the development of European society, and that actually relied on being able to extract value from Africa and from other colonized people by actually limiting obscuring the significance of that value in a way by characterizing it as primitive accumulation of something only important as it related to the development of white society, European society. What we are saying is that they missed the boat. That the thing that gave a rise to the society that Marx and Lenin found themselves dealing with is colonialism. This is what they characterize as primitive accumulation of capital that will somehow contribute to the development of human society, and actually is extracted the value and made an assault on the development of human society, and funnel the development from humans in the world to the development of European society that with the emergence of capitalism. So the capitalism that Lenin and Marx talked about destroying was something that rested upon a pedestal of the exploitation, the suppression, the life draining existence of African and other colonized people. When we talk about the African Socialist International, is to unite African people and the peoples of the world to overturn this pedestal upon which all capitalist activity exists. That's a fundamental difference in our international. So it is to bring all the peoples of the world, all the workers of the world. In fact, not some imagined, that includes the invisible people, as often we have been defined and have defined ourselves in relationship to white people, is to bring the invisible people, the people that Marx and Lenin could not see for our own significance. It's to give consciousness to those of us who have been characterized as primitive accumulation of our role and responsibility to overturn this whole social system and to put the Europeans in their proper places, as opposed to our being the objects of history and Europeans being the subjects of history. We have attained the kind of understanding that changes that around. So Europeans become the objects of history, and Africans and the oppressed of the world become subjects of history. And this is even biblical in the sense that the last shall be first and the first shall be last. I don't know if that was coherent enough, but Carmen Louise, I appreciate the question. And I always anticipate you raising the kind of issues that will take up most of the discussion that we engaged in. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Oh, with that being said, so we'll go take some, because he does have some other great questions. So we'll go ahead and look at some of the others. But thank you, SG Loazy. And this question comes from Michael T. Michael asks and comments, a very interesting discussion as always, Chairman. Listening to today's study makes me realize that a major part of the problem concerning the critical question of towards what end, especially among Africans in the US and throughout the diaspora, seems to be that we confuse the struggle for democracy and self-determination with the struggle for full recognition of our human and citizenship rights. How do we reconcile this?
That's absolutely true. And that's what we're talking about now. And the question that you raised, Comment Michael, is a part of the reconciliation. Part of dealing with that, you can't reconcile the whole notion that somehow we are enslaved, but instead of fighting to get rid of slavery, we are fighting to be accepted by the slave masters. That's extraordinary. And if you succeed in being accepted by the slave master, the only thing you've done is tighten the chains on yourselves that much more effectively. So that's why it's so important that we engaged in what some people may assume to be unnecessary kind of ideological struggle. And we place so much significance on the question of theory, philosophy, ideology, to what end? It's not an empty thing that when we talk about Black Lives Matter being nonsensical and diversionary claptrap, it's not some empty slander that we're trying to make against these African petty bourgeois leaders. And it's not even about the fact that the white people, the corporations gave them $90 million. We could use $90 million. That's not $1 million. That's not what it's about. It's about the fact that it's diversionary, that there is no way, even with $90 million, which is nothing, actually, that we can that doesn't direct us toward overturn this relationship we have with the system. It's the system that oppresses us. It's a system that's born of colonial slavery that has to be challenged and targeted, and simply whining that Black Lives Matter does not help the people to move in that direction. So it's a brand that's been promoted. It's promoted by Facebook. It's promoted by Biden. It's promoted by the whole most of the bourgeois establishment can support it because it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't challenge the status quo at all. So the political line, the political theory is critical. It's not something that can be taken lightly. So Michael T., that's what we're involved in, right now, engaged in that struggle. And part of what it is to help to elevate the whole question of theory, the whole question of having a theoretical leadership to which our movement is anchored. That's what we engaged in right now with this discussion. Of course, I'm reading from the political report to the African People's Socialist Party, which means that whether people in the party and the Uhuru movement are aware and conscious of it all the time, that's what we are doing, is sharpening our own relationship deepening our own relationship to philosophy, to theory, in the process of changing the world. And Marx said, and we agree, that philosophers have only interpreted the world. The task is to change the world. And so that's what we are about doing. We want to offer up a philosophy that directs us toward changing the world that we live in. And practice is primary. So that's the only way you can validate or invalidate what the philosophy is, and anybody's philosophy is. And you have to require everybody who says that they're representing for the struggle of our people. What is your philosophy? What is your theory? What is it that where are you trying to take me? That becomes the question that has to be asked of everyone. That's the question that we try to answer even before you ask it. Uhuru.
For Chairman. And yes, thank you to Comrade Michael for that question. We're going to move swiftly again to the next one. So this is actually a discussion that's happening in the YouTube chat, and discussion that's been happening between Comrades Mwambi Nyabinga and a Roy Pinas. And in Pinas, or Pinas.
Okay, Pinas.
So Roy asked, what do you think of the usefulness of America's Black bourgeoisie as described by Huey P. Newton?
Well, I don't know how Huey described him. At one point, Huey wrote something in, I think it was it Revolutionary Suicide, where he was taking another look at the African, what he called the bourgeoisie, the Black bourgeoisie, and offering a kind of self-criticism of the Black Panther Party for having built certain kinds of what they characterize as survival programs that was simply getting resources from the white capitalists and making them dependent on the white capitalists, as opposed to recognizing any validity in the Black capitalists. And somehow that had to be reconciled. And we're saying capitalism is capitalism. And that even though it is possible for there to be actual capitalist leaning forces in the anti-colonial movement, that the embracing capitalism is not the way forward. So to make use of them, I mean, in fact, we've created entities. In the African People's Socialist Party, part of the economic work that we do requires pulling Africans who are considered entrepreneurs and things like that into a project under the leadership of the Advanced Detachment, the Revolutionary Party, the vanguard, so that the struggle to overturn colonialism and lead to a different kind of social system is paramount. That's the leading factor. So we've created the African National Independence, ANIBA, a business association, where we will even train Africans who want to go into business and what have you, but lock them into an anti-colonial project so that whatever it is that they do, because there's going to be economic activity and economic life. Our objective is to overturn colonial capitalism. And we see that winning masses of African people to the struggle of destroying colonialism under the leadership of the African working class as represented by its advanced detachment as being the strategical dagger that we will thrust into the heart of this colonial capitalist system. So we say, yeah, let's organize these African petty bourgeois forces or African entrepreneurs or even people who are straight from the class who can be engaged in economic activity in a way that they're under the leadership of the strategic leadership of the African Revolution, and by which I mean the African Socialist Revolution that's led by the advanced detachment. If that's what we would talk about, comrades, in pursuing, that was comrade, who was comrade's name? I know Mwambe was one of them. It was
Roy and Nyabinga. I think to help to deal with the discussion that they were having in particular, Roy asked that question, but talking about the difference between, or not really difference, but talking about the Black petty bourgeoisie versus the idea of the existence of a Black bourgeoisie. So that was.
Yeah, I mean, that's been an outstanding kind of question for a long time ago. I mean, we hear people use the terms of the Black bourgeoisie, and what we say is that the bourgeoisie it's a social force. It's not just a designation that you give to somebody because they got a lot of money or not. The bourgeoisie is a social force. It is a class that owns and controls the means of production. There is no African class that owns and controls the means of production. At best, you have what we might characterize as comprador bourgeoisie. I mean, they sell out everything, or you have what might be called as bureaucratic bourgeoisie that use their position. Like in Congo, you had somebody like Mobutu, who, and not just Mobutu, I'm using him as an example now because the Mobutus exist all over the African world. They exist in St. Louis. But the point is that these factors who use their position in government in order to accumulate a lot of capital. But that's not the bourgeoisie. It is not they don't own and control the means of production. Even Mobutu simply presided over a situation where the real owners and those who own and control the means of production, they still do. That's part of what you see happening in Congo today. You've got the real bourgeoisie hiding behind Africans who are killing ourselves and engaged in this internecine wars and stuff like that to get this loot and resources into the coffers of the ruling class. So what we've said is that you might have pretenders, you might have aspiring forces who are, and we do have, they aspire to be the bourgeoisie. We call them the primitive petty bourgeoisie, because they are on the make and given an opportunity. And that's one of the things that we talk about in terms of what the outcome of the struggle for national liberation is going to be. Because the outcome of the struggle for national liberation has to be the emancipation of the African working class and the workers becoming those who own and control the means of production. That's why the working class in its own revolutionary organization has to lead the struggle for national liberation as well as the struggle for communism or socialism as it might be characterized. That's what made us appreciate what the Vietnamese tried to do for such a long period of time in the isolated situation that they existed in, et cetera. So I don't know, Roy or Mwambe, if we've addressed that at all, but the so-called notion of a Black bourgeoisie is fanciful, and it gives the ability of the rulers of the world to be able to misdirect the attention of an understanding of people, to deflect it from recognition of the nature of the relationship that we have to capital and capitalism. So you have a whole sector that's been trained, that's been taught how to think, how to understand the world, cannot see success outside of being a part of this monstrosity that has been imposed on African people. And they've been given an actual material stake in it. They will fight harder than the white people, white power, to protect this relationship of oppression and exploitation, because that's how they feed themselves, that's how they feed their family, that's how they feed parts of their ethnic group that they let to get in on some of the looting, etc. But the reality is that it is imperialism, it's a colonial capitalist system. It's not simply a capitalist system, it's a colonial capitalist system. And it's capitalism that rests upon the foundation of colonial oppression and expropriation of value, both material and otherwise, human value from Africa and colonized working people around the world, Uhuru. So I hope that was helpful, comrades. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, yes. Mwambi said that answered it. Thank you. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and move to the next question, because like I said, we have so many, and I know we won't be able to get to all of them today, but the next one comes from Comrade Mazzamella in San Diego. And he asked, Uhuru, Chairman, I recently watched that series, Small Acts. It was a rather remarkable series for the most part, but had contradictions emerging from the politics that encompass it. Much of the series takes place at the time you were actually working to build the ASI in the UK and other parts of Europe. You knew some of those people. Can you speak about that experience you had organizing in Europe in relationship to your report on the ASI today? Though they led many heroic activities, it does seem that the Race Today collective experienced some of the contradictions you outlined existed amongst some Africans in the UK. In one Spear article in the 80s, you stated that the RTC were capable of showing the problems, but not the solutions in the UK. In many ways, this contradiction reveals itself in the series Small Acts. So.
Yeah, Small Acts, I wasn't able to actually watch the entire thing. I watched perhaps the first one of them. And you're right, I knew Darcus Howe. We had serious debates for a while. They opened the door in many ways for us when we came into England. We sent a young organizer, Demisha Blackearth. I think she was 19 years old when she headed the work for the Free Desi Woods. And she went on an international tour. And Darcus Howe and the Race Today collective, really sort of provided her the space, and they were a really influential force in London at the time. And there were other kinds of work that we did with them. Darcus Howe was also the nephew of CLR James, and it was through Darcus Howe that I came to know CLR James as well, which was an interesting experience. But that's a deep one, Comrade Mazzamella, because one of the things that we ran into is ideological and theoretical limitations of the movement as it expressed itself in Europe, and particularly in England at the time, where you had such a small portion of the overall population were African people. And there was, in fact, Malcolm X had in some ways inadvertently contributed to some of the contradictions there, because it was Malcolm's influence that allowed for them to talk about Black liberation and the struggle for Black freedom. And they included in the struggle for Black people all of the people who were not white, who lived in England. And we found ourselves doing work in England where it was very difficult for initially to win Africans to unite, to struggle as Africans, to be part of the African Socialist International. In fact, we ran into a serious headwind trying to build the African Socialist International in England and London in particular, because they said to do that would affect in a real bad way the unity, the Black and Asian unity as they characterized it at the time. And it was crazy because the Asians were not just quote unquote generic forms. They were Kashmirians, they were Indians, they were all other kinds of forces on the one hand, while Africans could only be Black, but we couldn't be African. So Black and Asian unity would have been disrupted from their perspective by uniting to build the African Socialist International and concentrating, making our primary organizational and effort to win Africans to participate in the overall African Revolution. So the politic was affected by that. The politic was affected by, like C.L.R. James, like W.E.B. Du Bois, was a very brilliant man, and he left Trinidad and went to England, and like so many brilliant people of that period and today, became radicalized in part. He was radicalized in part because of the inability of to break into to be accepted for his value, what he was, his intellectual prowess and stuff like that, and became involved in the whole movement. And for them, socialism became this struggle they became the Black working class was something that they fought for, but not for capturing Black political power or state power. And the Black working class they fought for, though perhaps intellectually having some kind of relationship to Black people, quote unquote, in other places around the world, presupposed the ability of having this kind of multinational conclusion to it that did not necessarily represent itself as overturning the colonialism that oppressed us. So, but there were others there, and because I don't know if Small Axe actually showed us some of the other forces that were there and on the ground doing serious struggle in England that we met and worked with, and we I forgot the name of the cafe that was represented in that Small Axe. I'm sure I was there. I'm sure that we met with. I know we worked with most of the forces there on the ground, including Race Today, Darcus Howe, Leah Hassan, who was his partner, the person who was the spoken word artist who became quite famous. What did we call him? What was his name? I can't think of it right now. But yeah, we worked with them, and we did experience a serious kind of limitation there. Darkers and the Race Today Collective, they were connected with Africans around the world. I mean, I attended, they organized this magnificent book fair that happened in London that I attended. And not only was I there, but there were other revolutionaries. There were revolutionaries who were there, at least people who had been participating in the struggle at different times on the continent of Africa, who we were able to make contact with as a consequence of that occurrence. So I don't know how much more I can say about that. I did feel like there were serious limitations because they did not have the advantage of African internationalism, which presupposed that you could fight. You didn't have to fight to be English to be a winner. You could fight for Africa, and that's what African internationalism allows African people, wherever they are located, wherever we are located, whether it's in Mississippi or whether it's in Brixton, in London, to fight for Africa, our Africa. And anyway, there were various other kinds of entities, and the British government, like many of the governments in Europe, had these kind of charities that would often contribute to the establishment of the organizations there. I mean, like I said, I'm very proud of the relationship we established with some of these brothers and sisters and organizations in London and in England in particular. I'm not sure how much the Small Axe reflects accurately reflects much of that. I enjoyed seeing it, but I enjoyed seeing that first one. I saw the first one. I didn't see the entire thing. I couldn't after that first one, but yeah, I did know some of the people who were mentioned there and worked with them and sometimes struggled with them. Uhuru, Carmen Masamela.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman.
So you have an analysis of it, Masamela. You're always on top of that kind of situation, but that's sort of how I remember it. Comrade Luizi, who lives in London and lived there for a while. He wasn't there when much of what the Small Axe attempted to represent, but he lived in the wake of that. And Darcus Howe himself, I don't know if, yeah, I think the movie did show Darcus Howe. That was the only time they showed Darcus Howe and some of the Black Panther movement people being jailed. Darcus Howe was jailed after that as well for other kinds of things. But and he was a very brilliant person, Darcus Howe. But I was there in London, and C.L.R. James during that same period of time. It blew my mind when C.L.R. James took the stage. And one of the events that happened during this International Black and Radical Book Fair that they did. And C.L.R. James stood up on the stage and said something about the greatest revolutionary movement that's happened since the Paris Commune, or something to that effect. Where is it? Poland. And what was he talking about? He was talking about Lech Wałęsa, Poland, who was working like with the Pope, ultimately the CIA, and somehow this was what they were characterizing, this great revolutionary movement that happened there. So yeah, that was, and Linton Kwesi Johnson was the spoken word person of some important notoriety at the moment. So yeah, we knew them and worked with them and struggled with them on some levels and what have you. But and they did important work. I can't deny that, but they were not African internationalists, and that was a profound weakness that they suffered. Uhuru.
Thank you again, Chairman. And this history is really profound. And thank you to Comrade Matamela, who is the Cadre Development Director for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as our historian. So he knows a lot of this. And he actually does, he wrote a review of Small Axe article that's on the Burning Spear. So, so our next question comes from Comrade Life. Life asks, if such a distinction exists, is it important to distinguish colonialism from imperialism? Please explain why or why not.
Okay, first of all, what I want to say is that imperialism is a term that was really developed by V.I. Lenin, who led the Bolshevik revolution that conquered power in Russia in 1917. But Lenin, it wasn't he who first defined it. His definition has become the one that has survived. There were other people who were talking about imperialism, were trying to define it in a way that did not target capitalism. And so Lenin put forth the definition of imperialism as capitalism developed to its highest stage, having become parasitic, having become monopoly, having become several other kinds of things. And he characterized imperialism as capitalism that has become rotten ripe. And what we are saying is that imperialism itself is a term that comes from the word empire, and that it was not imperialism, it was not capitalism that developed imperialism, which is a sense of the dog, of the tail wagging the dog. It was empire that created capitalism. Empire. That is where you see the Europeans going out of Europe and capturing African and other territories and colonizing and enslaving us, that brought in the kind of resources that Marx characterized as the primitive accumulation of capital that gave birth to capitalism. So it wasn't capitalism that gave birth to imperialism. It wasn't capitalism developed to its highest stage that became imperialism. It was imperialism developed to its highest stage that became capitalism, and imperialism was born from colonialism. Capitalism was born from colonialism. So that's what we're saying. So the difference is that we see empire as and the acts of empire, coming from these small feudal entities that united all of the feudal states into a single state, united Africa and other colonized people into a particular single economy that became capitalism. Empire birthed capitalism, and empire birthed capitalism through colonialism. So colonialism became the bridge between feudalism and capitalism. It was colonial capitalism. So colonialism was a mode of production that was came into existence through empire, and not the other way around. And so I hope that addressed the Comrade Life. Yeah, there is a distinction. It was again empire, imperialism that created capitalism, and empire created capitalism through the colonial colonizing Africans and other peoples around the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Life. Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman. Oh, I was just going to say that I appreciate that answer, and it looks like it deals with some other discussion that was happening specifically around that question. So just appreciate that answer. And so we have yeah, okay, so we still have some more questions. Another one from Kamran Mwambi asks, I have read about socialist internationals of the past and hear people say they are internationalists. Can you speak about the difference of these in the African Socialist International and African Internationalists?
I'm not sure. I mean, like you said, there are others who've done that. I loved Che Guevara because he was genuinely an internationalist. Born in Argentina, white man born in Argentina. I say white man because he was. I forgot where his family was from. You find that in a lot of Argentina, Chile, other places throughout the throughout the Americas, and including North America. But he was an actual internationalist and somebody who tried to organize an all-African guerrilla war to defeat imperialism, and obviously failed in doing that. And we are internationalists. And I'm glad you raised that because it gives us an opportunity just to say something about this moment. I was talking earlier about how 40 years ago when we built the party, there was a kind of internationalism that presupposed a connection between all of the revolutionary and oppressed peoples around the world. It was experienced ideologically, and to some extent it was experienced organizationally. I mean, Comrade Huey P. Newton actually volunteered to send Black Panthers to fight with the Vietnamese against US imperialism. That would have sent him to prison today because the FBI now has done that. They've gone into places like Minneapolis and then told African young people there who hate imperialism because of what it's doing to them in Minneapolis and also what it's doing to them in Somalia, and said, you can go to Somalia to fight against the Americans, and this is the FBI entrapping people. And Huey did offer the Vietnamese Revolution to be able to send Africans from this country to fight on the side of the Vietnamese as a part of one single, like revolutionary project. And that was a statement of internationalism as well. And there's something else I could mention, but I don't have enough time to talk about that. And that's just in terms of how the Communist Party USA really misused Africans during the so-called war against fascism that was taking place in Spain, and created the so-called Lincoln Brigade, where Africans who in the 30s facing lynchings and all kind of murder and brutality were recruited to go to Spain to fight against fascism there, while colonialism was killing us in the United States, and there was no effort by the Communist Party USA to organize anybody to fight against the murder that the US was committed against us. But internationalism, we are internationalists, and I think the fundamental question is that most of what is characterized as the white left finds itself fighting for white rights, even when they talk about internationalism, even when they talk about defending Venezuela. We're going to do this for Venezuela, we're going to do this for other oppressed peoples around the world, etc., but do not recognize that the real internationalism presupposes struggling to destroy the actual colonial foundation of all capitalist activity, which means that they would also internationalism. How can you be an internationalist in New York, and your internationalism only sends you to occupy a Venezuelan embassy or to a conference in Venezuela in solidarity with the people in Venezuela on the one hand, but not send you to work under the leadership of people fighting against colonial domination in New York, in the United States, et cetera. So it's bogus. That's part of what we're saying. It's a kind of internationalism from the pedestal, from somebody sitting on top of the pedestal, watching the world, et cetera. And Masamela Odom, I see a sending to the chat, you know, like how Garvey, you know, actually experienced and demonstrated a certain serious kind of internationalism. And that's something that many Garveyites, characterized Garveyites, refuse to recognize. And many people who hate Garvey also refuse to recognize him as an internationalist. And he was an internationalist. Much of the world revolutionary movement at that time was Ho Chi Minh, was who influenced by Garvey. He attended Garvey meetings in New York City. And the FBI, we've seen documents where the FBI snitches who integrated the FBI and as a means of getting the FBI into the Garvey movement, testified that revolutionaries around the world, when they came to the United States, they reported to Garvey. So internationalism is common to our struggle. It ain't common to the white struggle. It really isn't. You know, it's like white rights that they find themselves fighting for. And even those people who talk about how much they hated what the Nazis, National Socialism, et cetera, they function more as National Socialists as opposed to genuine internationalists, because a genuine internationalist would find themselves working under the leadership of the African Revolution and the revolutionary peoples of the world to destroy this pedestal that has provided life and benefits for Europeans, including the European working class. Uhuru Carmen Muambi. I don't know if I addressed that. I know I didn't do it directly, but I hope that was helpful. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and Uhuru Carmen Muambi. So we are nearing the end of time, and I'm going to just go ahead and ask this last question, Chairman, but just—
Before you do that, you know, because I see Carmen Muambi was saying something, he talked about how Garvey said he'd unite with communism at the US at the moment they moved to Russia. Garvey was involved in a real practical fight with white people who call themselves communists, who tried to infiltrate the organization, tried to take over the organization, use the organization, Cyril Briggs and the so-called African Blood Brotherhood to try to take over the Garvey movement, because Garvey had an organization with 11 million members and supporters around the world. And the Communist Party USA, the first position that it published around Black people in the United States was an attack on Marcus Garvey. So what they were doing, everything they could to undermine Garvey's movement, and they were there. And so Garvey's position around communism most often reflected the struggle that he was engaged with white people who call themselves communists in the US and perhaps in other places around the world. But Garvey sent letters of congratulations for the Russian Revolution to Trotsky and Lenin. He sent those to Trotsky and Lenin. So, and then he organized the largest, most significant revolutionary working class movement in the world, bigger than the Common International in terms of how African workers and peasants all around the world were connected to that revolutionary movement. And it was a revolutionary movement, again, that was dominated by working class. And that's one of the reasons Du Bois and other so-called Negro socialists hated Garvey because of his connection with the workers and working people. And that was something that they could not do effectively. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And thank you to, yes, that was Muambi with the question and Matsumelo with the follow-up, I believe, in the comment section. Chairman, I'll ask, since we started late, do you want to extend it a couple of minutes or?
We could, I guess, we could do it a couple.
Okay, well, just to get this last question in.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll take this question. This comes from Comrade Matsumelo. I think it's a good one. It says, Uhuru Chairman, what is the relationship between cadre membership and mass organization within a single party or movement like ours?
Well, we define, I think, cadre. I think we did a pretty decent job in defining cadre, because all members of the African Socialist Party are not cadre. All members of the party should aspire to be cadre. To be cadre, again, is to prioritize, the emancipation of our people. To be cadre is to put the interests of the class and the party first and foremost. It's to actually submit to the will of the party and to the African Revolution. Everybody can't do that and won't do that for any number of reasons. And people hedge their bets often. They want to come into the party. Sometimes they come into the party and they run from the party because they come into the party because they may participate in discussion like this, or they may see the party engaged in some kind of action someplace in the world and it seems exciting and romantic, but the party works, and the party is a commitment to overturning our oppression. There are people in the party now, in the leadership of the party, who at different times felt insulted because we said that the central, that the thing about making cadre is that we are professional revolutionaries, and that's what we live and fight for and struggle around. So everybody can't be cadre. And there are members of sometimes in the mass organizations in some ways that function better than members of the party. They function more like cadre sometimes in some ways than members of the party. But they are not in the party because they have either not been as effective in lying about their fidelity to the party and the revolution, or they there are certain aspects of being in the party that they were unable to live with. So this question of cadre is critical, and all of us, need to really struggle to be cadre. We used to say that it takes something like 7 years, for a person to actually become cadre, and it's really interesting because this is not simply some kind of abstract characterization, even though it appears to be purely abstract. But I've found that people actually really know it when it happens. When you have changed and transformed to such a point that the revolution becomes everything, becomes your priority, the party, African internationalism, the line. This becomes the driving force for you. And most of us, I think, sort of get it when it happens, even if we're struggling with it for long periods of time. And so I don't, there's not enough time to, I guess, deal with this effectively, although I would advise people to go to that part of the political report where we were talking about cadre earlier on, where we quoted Les Zwan, where we quoted the party itself in terms of what it is to be cadre. And there are other things that we've done, other documents, as you know, Comrade Masamela, and I'm sure that you are providing for the overall party and your role as director of cadre development. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and thank you to Comrade Masamela again for this question and all of the questions that you've provided up to now that has allowed us to deepen this discussion. So one more question, Chairman, and then we'll go ahead and we'll move to your summation. So this one comes from Comrade Diop, and he asks, Uhuru, you project the objective of winning liberated territories in the domestic colonies we exist in as a people in North America and other imperialist centers. How does this objective relate to the struggle for African liberation, as well as the struggle for self-determination for the oppressed people who are indigenous to the land upon which the struggle for liberation of territory would occur?
Okay, I'm hoping that I understand Comrade Diop's question, but the notion of having self-determination that is not connected to actual land and territory is silly. I mean, the fact is that we're talking about self-government. You can't self-govern air. You can't, it's not out of space someplace. It's actually where people live and exist and try and have their families and their existence. So the capture of political power, the capture of power, no matter how small it may appear to be in terms of the actual terrain, is an objective of every revolutionary movement. And that's true of African people who are in the United States. We say that Africans, Africa is our mother country that has to be liberated, and for sure. But the fact is that we we of the Americas and we are of the in the Americas too. And so like we participate in seizing territory and making revolution without liquidating the reality that this land that we occupy now is the land of the indigenous people, and that it helps to define the oppressive reality and of exploitation that the native people of this land experience on a regular basis. So we're not one of those who talk about some kind of new Africans in the U.S. We recognize that in the U.S. This is a settler colony, and by definition, a settler colony means a territory and people occupied by settlers, by foreigners, as opposed to this being a land that's simply the colonizers come and extract value that they send home. They decided to make this home and keep and steal the value themselves. That's part of how. That's an essential definition of the contradiction that's experienced by the indigenous people here in the Americas. So our responsibility living as an internal colony in this mix is to make this revolution, recognizing the strategic significance of the indigenous people capturing their land and territory and fighting for our own liberation in solidarity and unity with the efforts of the indigenous people. We can't make a revolutionary struggle without occupying territory, so we recognize that. And but we do not make a claim that somehow in fighting for territory in the United States that we are engaged in resolution of the primary contradiction that stands between us and colonial capitalism. The struggle that we make is united with the struggle of the indigenous people to take back their land and resources, and we forge our relationship with the indigenous people in that process of so doing. And a convoluted kind of response, Comrade Diop, but you can't make a revolution. You can't, it's crazy to even talk about a fight for power that does not include occupying territory. Physically, in terms of ideologically, politically, organizationally, we have to have territory has to be occupied. And I think this is one of the things that's been a problem for the new Africanists, because they can't envision this struggle for territory without taking somebody else's land, without becoming a Negro Zionist, a Black Zionist, or something like that, claiming somebody else's land as a means of acquiring our own freedom and independence. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much for that answer. And I just think that was a brilliant way again to say that we're African internationalists. And I just think that obviously African internationalism speaks to that question of not just
African internationalism makes the strategic aim of the we talked about in tactics and strategy, turning every African community, all the spaces, into what we characterize as African Soviets. That we make them something that white power cannot occupy, cannot occupy easily, that we seize the power, etc. That's exactly what we have to do. But the strategic aim of the African Revolution, wherever we are, is what? Is the actual, absolute, total liberation of Africa and unification of Africa and the African nation, African people dispersed around the world. That's our strategic aim. And so we fight for that, whether we're in Milwaukee or whether we're in Ghana. The strategic aim is a total liberation of Africa and unification of Africa and African people globally. And so when we fight in the United States, even when we're talking about taking space and territory, we do that in total solidarity with the indigenous people whose land has been stolen from them. And as a part of our struggle to liberate, unite Africa and African people globally. Uhuru, thank you.
Uhuru, what an coincidentally beautifully wrapping question to this whole section. Uhuru, so thank you, Comrade Diop, and thank you to everyone, for sticking with us, and all of your questions were incredible. Chairman, I want to just give it to you to close out, and we can, to give your closing remarks before we get to it.
I just want to express everybody's participation here, my appreciation. And again, this is something that was initiated to deepen our party and the Uhuru movement, and really appreciate having the ability to have this discussion beyond just the ranks of the party and the Uhuru movement, because we make a major assault against the kind of spontaneity that influences too much of the revolution, and that's promoted by the ruling class. Promote spontaneity, promote a divorce from organization, promotes a divorce from ideological, basis, and et cetera. Disdain for theory. The rulers do that. And these petty bourgeois in our own midst do that too, because they always claim that ordinary African workers and poor people, they can't understand it. They say, you're saying all this stuff, but we know what you're talking about, but just ordinary people can't understand that somehow they are different. But what we've come to understand is that if I can understand it, ordinary African workers can understand it too. And if you can understand it, there's nothing that's significant and different about you that you can understand, and then you dismiss the masses of the people of being unable to understand. More than likely, the African petty bourgeoisie would have the greatest difficulty in understanding it because their ability to understand things is tied to their class aspirations and their class location. In order for them to really understand it, they have to shed themselves of their aspirations of a middle class African petty bourgeoisie and unite with the aspirations of the most oppressed sectors of our people. So I want to thank everybody for being here. There's a lot of work that we still have to do, and to you, Comrade Akile.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, again, I really want to appreciate you for this incredible study, as they always are, and just again reviewing the 2017 political report and its significance and weight that it holds in the year 2021 is deeply felt. And just from the questions and discussion that people were having in the comments regarding what it is that you've been laying out, I mean, it was on fire. And as mentioned, we have so many other questions that we didn't even get to. So we'll be able to review those and look at them next week. And I just also, again, want to be, self-critical for the late start and just really appreciate everybody's patience and sticking on with us the whole time and getting your questions, answered. So just thank you all so much. And as mentioned, because of time, we want to let everyone know that if your question was not answered, that it has been taken down, and we will note it to be asked in the Q&A portion of next week's Sunday study. And this study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, where we're winning the war of ideas. For your worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com, and want to go ahead and announce for your, we're going to actually show some, some of the promos on the screen. So if I could just have my engineer share screen for me so we can show you what we got going on. There we go. All right. So for revolutionary radio and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice, as mentioned by the chairman, that the goal is to put the theory into practice. So all the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuhuru.org, and fill out our contact form. And you can order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, as well as An Uneasy Equilibrium. And all of the other publications from the chairman and other leaders of our movement can be found at burningspearmarketplace.com. And we have the Garment Factory Naming Contest. So enter today into the Garment Factory Naming Contest hosted by the African People's Socialist Party in occupied Azania and Black Star Industries. The Garment Factory is going to be one of the many economic institutions of dual and contending power formed by the party. There is no fee to enter the contest. The deadline for entries is midnight, Sunday, June 19th. The winner of the contest will receive $100, $50 for the name of the garment factory, and $50 for the tagline. So submit your entries to nameit@blackstarindustries.org. The African National Women's Organization calls on Black women and our supporters to attend the 2021 Black Women's Convention, July 10th through the 11th, 2021, which will be held online. This will be a gathering of working class Black women who believe that capitalist colonialism must be destroyed in order for African women to be free. We believe that through building an organization that is dedicated to raising deep struggle against the devastating impact that colonialism has on the lives of African women around the world, that we will consolidate and fortify our efforts to defeat capitalism despite our borders or our conditions. This year's theme, One Voice, Many Fists, is a recognition of the many struggles waged by African women and the attempt to collectivize and define our voice through the theory of African internationalism, not feminism. You can register today at convention.anwauhuru.org. On Tuesday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Tune in by calling 347-857-3293. Ralph Pointer sits on the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee and chairs the BIBC's Political Prisoners Working Group and also leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. We're also calling on people to follow the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus COVID-19. APDEP recently launched an international telehealth program, a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional healthcare providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. Like and follow the Lowezi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Secretary General Lowezi Kinshasa does frequent lives, such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French, and if you want alerts when SG Lowezi goes live, make sure to like and follow his page today. If you're looking for more opportunities for live political education from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Chairman Omali Yeshitela Facebook like page and Burning Spear TV YouTube page with Chairman's address to the African nation, discussing important topical issues and providing us with an African internationalist analysis. And lastly, to keep up with our movement events, visit the burningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru.